She was abandoned, pregnant with twins, and believed she would never trust anyone again, until a millionaire entered her life and did the impossible. What began with simple gestures transformed into a love capable of healing scars, confronting the past, and rebuilding a family. A story of faith, resilience, and surrender that will touch your heart. Get ready, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The bell of the small bakery chimed, announcing another customer. Emily sighed discreetly, feeling the weight of a body that hadn't properly rested in days. Her eyes, once bright, were shadowed by the fatigue of sleepless nights. Even so, she rehearsed the smile she reserved especially for work, one that didn't betray the worries eating her from within. "Good morning. What would you like today?" she asked, while wiping her hands on her white apron, trying to disguise the subtle tremor afflicting them. On the other side of the counter, a tall man in an impeccable suit looked at her with disconcerting intensity. He wasn't a regular customer. "A black coffee, no sugar, and whatever pastry you recommend," he replied in a deep voice, his eyes surveying the simple but cozy bakery environment. "May I suggest the lemon tart? I just took it out of the oven," said Emily, avoiding prolonged eye contact. "Perfect." While serving the order, Emily's cell phone vibrated in her apron pocket. It was the babysitter, the third one this month. Probably another resignation. She felt her stomach sink, her hands suddenly cold despite the kitchen's heat. How would she pick up the twins from school if she needed to stay late to make up for last week's losses? When she returned with the order, the plate slipped from her trembling hands. The white porcelain shattered on the floor, scattering shards and pieces of tart across the wooden floor. The sound echoed through the small establishment, followed by an awkward silence. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, quickly kneeling to collect the fragments, her vision blurred by tears she refused to shed. To her surprise, the man knelt beside her. "Let me help," he offered, already gathering the larger pieces. "It's not necessary, Do you have a broom?" he interrupted gently, ignoring her objections. Emily pointed to the cleaning closet. Their hands briefly met as they tried to grab the same shard. The touch, though brief, sent a strange shiver down her spine. He had strong hands, but surprisingly gentle ones. "Thank you, but you didn't need to trouble yourself," she said, avoiding his eyes. "I'll prepare another order, please." "Don't worry about that right now," he replied, studying her pale face. "You look like you need to sit down for a bit. Is everything all right?" The question, seemingly simple, hit Emily like a wave. Was everything all right? No, it wasn't. Nothing had been right since Michael abandoned her pregnant with twins 5 years ago, leaving her with debts, a broken heart, and an uncertain future. Nothing was right when she had to choose between paying rent or buying school supplies. Nothing was right when her children asked about the father they never knew. "I'm fine," she lied, forcing another smile. "Just a little tired." He didn't seem convinced but didn't press further. While Emily prepared another order, he remained seated, observing the sea visible from the bakery window. It was a privileged view of the small coastal town, the infinite blue contrasting with the green of the mountains in the background. "Do you always work alone here?" he asked casually when she returned with a new order. "Yes. I can't afford employees yet." "Is it yours?" "What?" "The establishment." Emily felt a pang of pride amidst the fatigue. "Yes, I bought it 2 years ago, after saving every penny working 3 different jobs." He nodded, a glimmer of admiration in his brown eyes. "Impressive," Emily shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Necessity. I have 2 children to raise." "Alone?" he asked, and immediately added, "Sorry, it's none of my business." "Yes, alone," replied Emily, surprising herself with her own honesty. There was something about this man that made her comfortable, despite all her hard-earned distrust. The bell at the door rang again, announcing the arrival of more customers. Emily moved away, grateful for the interruption that saved her from continuing that dangerously personal conversation. When she finished serving the elderly couple who had entered, she noticed that the man had left a card on the table, along with a generous tip. On the small rectangle of linen paper was written simply, "James Miller, architect," and a phone number. Emily tucked the card in her pocket, not understanding why her heart was beating a little faster. It took 3 visits for Emily to finally allow herself a longer conversation with James. He always appeared at the same time, shortly before lunch, when the bakery was emptier. He would sit at the same table near the window, order black coffee and a slice of lemon tart, and work silently on his laptop for about an hour. On the fourth day, when rain was falling mercilessly outside and no other customers ventured through the streets, James closed his computer and called to her. "Don't you ever take a break?" Emily hesitated, glancing at the wall clock. "I have to pick up my children from school in an hour. Time enough for coffee," he insisted, pulling out the chair across from his. She surrendered, removing her apron and serving herself a cup of tea. The rain beat against the windows, creating a bubble of isolation around them. "So, architect?" she asked, trying to start a safe conversation. James smiled. He had a discreet, contained smile that illuminated mainly his eyes. "Yes, specialized in historical restorations and sustainable projects. That explains why I've never seen you around here before. Are you just passing through?" "Not exactly. I bought a house on the hillside, that abandoned Williams property. I'm personally supervising the restoration." Emily's eyes widened. "The Williams mansion? I thought no one would ever buy that place. They say it's haunted," he completed, with a trace of amusement in his voice. "The only hauntings are the structural problems and terrible electrical wiring. Nothing good professionals can't solve. It must cost a fortune to restore a house that size. It's an investment. I plan to transform part of it into a small boutique hotel. The rest will be my residence." Emily studied him with curiosity. He didn't seem like the type of rich man she knew, those who made a point of flaunting their wealth, who looked at her with superiority or, worse, with predatory interest when they discovered she was a single mother. "You're not from here," she stated, more than asked. "San Francisco, but I grew tired of big city. I need the sea, the silent, a fresh start." There was something in his voice as he said the last word, a vulnerability that didn't match his confident posture. Emily felt a pang of identification. She too sought her fresh start every day. "And you?" he asked. "Have you always lived here?" "I was born here, left to study culinary arts in Boston. Came back 5 years ago when," she hesitated, "when I became pregnant." James didn't ask about the twins' father, and Emily silently thanked him for that. "Was the bakery your dream?" "One of them," she replied with a sigh. "But sometimes life has other plans." The clock struck 4. Emily rose abruptly. "I need to pick up my children. I can drive you all if you'd like. It's raining heavily." Emily felt all her defenses rise instantly. "No, thank you. I have my car." James raised his hands in surrender. It was just an offer. No ulterior motives. She nodded, embarrassed by her own exaggerated reaction, but unable to lower her guard. Trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. "Until tomorrow then," she said, grabbing her purse and keys. "Until tomorrow, Emily." The way he pronounced her name, with an almost reverent gentleness, echoed in her mind as she drove through the torrential rain to pick up Lucas and Lucy from school. The night brought an even stronger storm. The wind howled through the cracks in the windows of the small apartment Emily rented 3 blocks from the bakery. The twins, frightened by the thunder, ended up sleeping in her bed, one on each side, as they did when they were younger. Emily watched their sleeping faces, so similar yet so distinct. Lucas had a furrowed brow even in sleep, always worried, always trying to protect everyone, assuming at age 5 a responsibility that wasn't his. Lucy, on the other hand, slept with a slight smile on her lips, as if dreaming of something wonderful, preserving the innocence that Emily fought daily not to take from them. The rain lashed the windows when her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. "This is James. I just wanted to make sure you and your children made it home safely in this storm." Emily felt a wave of warmth rise in her chest. How long had it been since anyone at all, had worried about her well-being? "We're fine, thank you," she replied, after hesitating for a few minutes. 3 dots pulsed on the screen, indicating he was typing. "The storm is expected to continue until tomorrow. If you need anything, I'm staying at the Central Hotel while the house isn't ready." Emily looked at her sleeping children, and then at the window, where the rain showed no sign of letting up. She thought about the bakery, about the roof that always leaked when it rained heavily. She thought about her increasingly scarce savings, the overdue school tuition, the nearly empty refrigerator. "Good night, James," she simply typed. "Good night, Emily." That night, lulled by the sound of rain and the warmth of her children beside her, Emily dreamed of gentle hands collecting porcelain shards from the floor. The next morning brought confirmation of her fears. The bakery was partially flooded, with water infiltrating through the roof in several places. She couldn't open that day, maybe not even the next. Emily sat on the step at the entrance, the twins at her side, trying not to cry in front of them. Each day closed meant less money coming in, and the bills wouldn't wait. "Mom, everything will be okay," said Lucas, placing his little hand on her shoulder with a seriousness that broke her heart. That's when the black car parked in front of the bakery. James got out wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt, so different from the elegant executive of previous days. "I thought you might need help," he said simply, observing the water running down the interior walls. Emily wanted to refuse. She wanted to say she could handle this alone, as she'd always done. But the twins were already running towards him, as if they'd known him for years. "Your shop is leaking," exclaimed Lucy, pointing to the puddles forming on the floor. James smiled at the little girl, crouching to be at her height. "Nothing we can't fix. Would you like to help me?" Lucy nodded enthusiastically. Lucas remained more reserved, positioning himself protectively next to his mother. "We don't need to trouble you," said Emily, but her voice betrayed the exhaustion and helplessness she felt. James looked at her seriously. "It's no trouble, Emily. It's what decent people do for each other." There was something in the simplicity of that statement that disarmed all her defenses. It wasn't charity, it wasn't interest, it was just humanity. "All right," she finally yielded. "Thank you." In a few hours, James had not only organized the cleaning of the bakery but also called a builder friend to evaluate the roof and start repairs immediately. He worked side by side with the workers, not minding getting his hands dirty or clothes wet. Emily watched, divided between gratitude and suspicion. Nobody did something like this without expecting anything in return. That was the harshest lesson life had taught her. When most of the work was underway, James suggested taking the twins out for lunch. They were restless, confined to the small back room while the adults worked. "I know a great place near the wharf," he said, cleaning his hands on a cloth. "They'll love seeing the boats." Emily hesitated, but the hopeful smile of her children convinced her. She needed to give them a few moments of joy amid the chaos. And, being honest with herself, she needed a break too. The restaurant was simple but cozy. Specializing in seafood, it had a deck that jutted out over the water, allowing them to watch fishing boats arriving with the day's catch. The twins were fascinated. "Can I order anything?" asked Lucy, her eyes shining at the colorful menu. "Anything," confirmed James before Emily could impose limits. Noticing her look, he added softly, "Please allow me to do this." Emily nodded, uncomfortable with the situation, but unable to deny her children this rare joy. Lunch proceeded with surprising naturalness. James chatted with the twins as if he'd known them for years, asking about school, their favorite cartoons, listening with genuine interest to their childish stories. With Emily, he was respectful, never crossing the invisible boundaries she had established. It was Lucy, with the brutal honesty of children, who broke the carefully maintained balance. "Are you going to be our new daddy?" she asked suddenly, between one forkful of shrimp and another. Emily choked on the water she was drinking. James maintained his composure, although a slight redness had risen up his neck. "Lucy," admonished Emily, mortified. "But Uncle James is nice like a daddy should be," insisted the girl. "He fixes things and brings us to see the boats. And he doesn't yell," added Lucas in a low voice, surprising Emily, "or make Mommy cry." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unasked questions and answers that Emily wasn't ready to give. James saved the situation, leaning toward the twins. With a gentle smile, "You know what I am? I'm a friend. Friends help each other and do fun things together. That's good, isn't it?" The children nodded, satisfied with the simple explanation. Emily felt a wave of gratitude for the way he handled the embarrassing situation. He made no promises, didn't feed fantasies, just offered something concrete and honest: friendship. When they returned to the bakery, the repairs were almost completed. James's builder friend assured that the roof would hold until they could do a more complete renovation. The shop could reopen the next day. "I don't know how to thank you," said Emily when they were finally alone. The twins occupied withdrawing. At a nearby table, "You don't need to thank me," he replied, serious. "I know what it's like to face storms alone, Emily. Sometimes a borrowed umbrella makes all the difference." There was a story behind those words, a pain she recognized because she carried it too. Before she could ask, James looked at his watch. "I need to go. I have a video conference in half an hour." He hesitated, as if wanting to say something more, but limited himself to smiling. "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," confirmed Emily, feeling that something important had changed between them that day. When James said goodbye to the twins with a high five they had devised, Emily realized it wasn't just between her and James that something had changed. He, in a way she didn't fully understand, was already beginning to fill a void in her children's lives, and that both terrified and comforted her at the same time. The following weeks brought a new routine for Emily and the twins. James appeared almost daily at the bakery, usually at the same time, working on his laptop while savoring the lemon tart that Emily now prepared especially for him. Sometimes he brought small gifts for the children, a coloring book, a handcrafted wooden car, a rare small shell found on the beach. They were simple gifts, never ostentatious, always carefully chosen. Emily noticed with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension that he respected her boundaries. He never tried to impress her with his wealth or buy the twins' affection with expensive presents. One Saturday, when the bakery closed early, James appeared with an unexpected proposal. "Do you know the abandoned lighthouse on the North Point?" The twins shook their heads, their eyes shining with curiosity. "It's a magical place, especially at sunset. I was thinking of having a picnic there. Would you like to come?" "Yes," exclaimed the twins in unison, turning to their mother with pleading looks. Emily hesitated. Going on an outing together would cross another line in the carefully maintained friendship they had established. On the other hand, it had been so long since she'd provided her children with a carefree afternoon of fun. "I think so," she finally replied, rewarded by the children's shouts of joy. The lighthouse was about half an hour away by car, at the end of a small cape that jutted into the ocean. Abandoned for decades, it had been partially restored as a tourist spot, although it rarely received visitors outside the high season. James drove a black SUV, discreetly luxurious. On the way, to Emily's surprise, he revealed himself to be knowledgeable about children's songs, singing cheerfully with the twins. There was a naturalness in his interaction with the children that didn't seem forced or studied. "Do you have nieces or nephews?" asked Emily as the twins, distracted by the scenery, excitedly pointed to rock formations along the shore. A shadow crossed James's face, so quickly that Emily almost thought she'd imagined it. "No, I had a younger brother, but he passed away a few years ago." The simplicity of the statement carried a weight of pain that Emily immediately recognized. It was the same tone she used when someone asked about the twins' father, apparently neutral, but hiding an ocean of suffering. Sorry," she said sincerely. James nodded, eyes fixed on the road. "That's why I left San Francisco. Too many memories." Emily wanted to ask more, but something in the way he gripped the steering wheel dissuaded her. Everyone had a right to their secrets, their private sorrows. She, more than anyone, knew this. The lighthouse was even more impressive than James had described. It rose imposingly over a rocky outcrop, its light stone walls contrasting with the deep blue of the ocean. An ancient, partially restored staircase led to the base of the structure. "Is it safe for the children?" asked Emily, concerned about the irregular steps. "Completely. I personally supervised the restoration 2 years ago, when I was still working for my old company." He spread a large blanket over the grass that grew around the lighthouse, while Emily arranged the sandwiches and fruit they had brought. The twins ran around excitedly, exploring every corner, asking 1,000 questions that James answered with infinite patience. "Can we go to the top?" asked Lucas, pointing to the tower that rose above them. "Not today," replied James, pointing to a sign that read, "Under maintenance. But I promise to bring you when it reopens. The view up there is incredible." The casual promise made Emily imperceptibly stiffen. Promises were dangerous. They created expectations, and broken expectations were the source of the worst pain. The picnic proceeded in a relaxed atmosphere. Emily found herself smiling more than she had in years. There was something about James's presence that made her feel safe, even though her rational mind insisted on keeping her defenses up. When the sun began to set, painting the sky with orange and pink hues, James took a small portable telescope from the car. "Who wants to see Venus? She appears first, before all the other stars." The twins crowded around him, marveling at the possibility of seeing a planet. As James adjusted the telescope, patiently explaining how it worked, Emily watched the scene with a lump in her throat. Michael had never shown the slightest interest in the twins, even during the pregnancy. In the few ultrasounds he accompanied, he was checking his phone, visibly bored. When Emily tried to share her excitement at feeling the babies kicking, he responded with disinterested monosyllables. And then, one day, he simply wasn't there anymore. A cold note on the kitchen table explained that he wasn't ready to be a father, that he needed to find his own path, as if fatherhood were an option one could simply discard. Seeing James now, pointing out constellations to her children with genuine enthusiasm, Emily felt a confused mixture of emotions. Gratitude for this man providing the twins moments their own father had denied them. Anger at Michael for abandoning these wonderful children. And fear, a deep, visceral fear, of allowing someone else into their lives, only to leave again. "Mom." "Come see," called Lucy, pulling her from her thoughts. "You can see the craters on the moon." Emily approached, accepting James's silent invitation to look through the telescope. The moon, partially illuminated, revealed fascinating details she had never noticed with the naked eye. "It's incredible," she murmured, genuinely impressed. "The universe is full of wonders we don't see in our daily lives," replied James, so close that she could feel his warmth. "Sometimes we just need the right tools to see them." Emily raised her eyes from the telescope and met his. For a moment it seemed he wasn't just talking about astronomy. There was an intensity in his gaze that made her look away, disconcerted. Return journey was quiet, with the twins asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the adventure. When they arrived at Emily's small apartment, James helped carry the children inside, carefully placing them in their beds. At the door, as he said, "Goodbye," there was a moment of hesitation between them. Emily knew she should just thank him and say goodnight, but something prevented her. A question she could no longer contain. "Why are you doing all this?" she whispered, so as not to wake the twins in the next room. "Why do you care about us?" James seemed caught by surprise by the direct question. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that Emily had already identified as a sign of nervousness. "Because you deserve someone who cares," he answered simply. Then, after a pause, he added, "And because being with you makes me feel alive again." The response, as honest as it was unexpected, left Emily speechless. Before she could respond, James stepped forward and very gently kissed her forehead. A chaste, almost fraternal gesture, but one that sent waves of warmth throughout her body. "Good night, Emily," he said, already moving away. "Thank you for the wonderful day." Emily stood at the door, watching him get into the car and leave. Only then did she realize she was crying. Silent tears she couldn't explain. The news arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, without warning. Emily was organizing the bakery's display cases when the bell at the door rang. A middle-aged woman, elegantly dressed, entered, looking around with an evaluative air. "May I help you?" asked Emily, noticing the designer shoes and the purse that probably cost more than her 6 months' rent. "Are you Emily Sanders?" asked the woman, with an unmistakable San Francisco accent. "Yes, I am." The woman smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Victoria Miller, James's mother." Emily felt her stomach sink. She didn't know what to expect from this unexpected meeting, but something in her instincts screamed danger. "Nice to meet you," she said automatically, extending her hand. "James didn't mention his mother would be visiting." "He doesn't know I'm here," replied Victoria, ignoring the extended hand. "In fact, I came to speak with you privately." The tone left. No doubt that it wouldn't be a pleasant conversation. Emily indicated a table at a distance. "Would you like coffee?" "No, thank you. I'll be brief." Victoria sat down, placing her expensive purse on the table as if marking territory. "I'll get straight to the point, Miss Sanders. What are your intentions with my son?" The question, as absurd as it was offensive, left Emily momentarily speechless. "Pardon me? Please, let's not pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. James is one of the most promising architects in the country, heir to a construction company valued in the millions. And suddenly he abandons everything to bury himself in this little town, obsessed with a baker who has 2 fatherless children." Each word was like a slap. Emily felt her face burn, divided between shame and indignation. "Mrs. Miller," she began, striving to maintain her composure. "I don't know what kind of person you think I am, but I don't have intentions with your son. We're just friends." Victoria let out a dry laugh. "Friends? James has never had female friends, and he certainly never spent fortunes renovating a friend's business. What are you talking about? You really don't know?" Victoria seemed genuinely surprised. "Who do you think paid for your bakery repairs? That new roof? The kitchen equipment that mysteriously appeared?" Emily felt her blood freeze. She had noticed improvements she hadn't requested, but James's builder friend always claimed they were included in the repair package. She suddenly felt betrayed, manipulated. "He didn't consult me about that," she murmured, more to herself than to Victoria. "Of course not. My son has always been like that, impulsive, driven by emotions. Since Catherine and Sophie died, even more so." "Catherine? And Sophie?" repeated Emily, confused. Victoria studied her face for a few seconds, understanding dawning in her eyes. "He didn't tell you." It wasn't a question. Catherine was his wife. Sophie, their daughter. They died in an accident 3 years ago. The girl was 4 years old, the same age as your twins, I suppose. The revelation hit Emily like a tsunami. Suddenly, everything made sense. James's natural way with children, the pain in his eyes when he spoke of the past, the way he seemed to perfectly understand Emily's daily struggle. "I'm so sorry," she said sincerely. "I had no idea." "It's obvious what's happening here," continued Victoria relentlessly. "James sees in you and your children the chance to replace the family he lost. He's projecting his feelings, don't you? See? You're just a convenient substitute." The words were cruel, calculated to hurt, and they hit the target perfectly. Emily felt tears threatening to fall, but she refused to give that pleasure to the woman in front of her. "I think our conversation is over, Mrs. Miller." "I agree. I just came to ask you to be honest with yourself. Do you really believe that a man like James, who could have any woman, would choose a failed baker with 2 fatherless children out of love? Or is it more plausible that he's just trying to fill a void?" Victoria stood up, adjusting her impeccable blazer. "For your sake and his, back off. James needs professional help, not a substitute family." With those final words, she left the bakery, leaving behind only the expensive perfume and a devastated Emily. James realized something was wrong the moment he entered the bakery that afternoon. Emily barely looked him in the eyes, responded with monosyllables, and maintained a deliberate physical distance. "Did something happen?" he finally asked when she brought his usual coffee. "Your mother visited me today," replied Emily, placing the cup on the table with more force than necessary. James visibly paled. "My mother? What did she say?" "Many interesting things. About Catherine and Sophie, for example. The names of the deceased wife and daughter seemed to have the effect of a physical punch." James closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. "I was going to tell you." "When?" Emily's voice trembled slightly. "After you renovated my entire bakery without consulting me? After my children were completely attached to you?" James ran his hands over his face, in a gesture of profound weariness. "It wasn't how I planned it. At first I just wanted to help. Afterwards, I couldn't find the right moment. There's no right moment to say you're using my family as a substitute for yours." The words came out louder than Emily intended. Some customers looked in their direction, curious. She lowered her voice, leaning over the table. "Your mother made it very clear what's happening. You see your dead daughter in my twins. You see your wife in me. We're just filling gaps." "That's not true," protested James, the pain evident in his gaze. "Yes, I lost my family. Yes, it destroyed me. Destroyed. But what I feel for you and the twins is real. It's present. It's not a substitution. How can I believe that now? How can I trust you when you hid something so fundamental? When you made improvements to my bakery behind my back?" James tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. "Emily, please, let me explain everything." "Not today," she replied, rising. "I need to process this, and I need you to stay away for a while." James's expression was one of pure desolation, but he nodded. Slowly, "I understand. But know that everything I did, every moment we spent together, was real. I never tried to replace anyone. I just found reasons to live again." Emily turned away, unable to continue looking at him without falling apart. "Please go." James left some bills on the table, much more than necessary to pay for the coffee, and left without saying anything more. That night, after putting the twins to bed, Emily finally allowed herself to cry. She wasn't sure exactly why she was crying. For James, for herself, for the family he had lost, or for the possibility of happiness that seemed to be slipping through her fingers. 2 weeks passed with no news from James. The bakery kept running, the twins went to school, and life followed its course, but Emily felt an emptiness she couldn't name. The twins asked about him constantly, especially Lucy, who had become attached in a way Emily hadn't foreseen. "Why doesn't Uncle James come to visit us anymore?" she asked almost daily. "He's busy with work, darling," Emily would reply, hating herself for the lie, but unable to explain the complex truth to a 5-year-old. On a particularly difficult afternoon, when one of the suppliers cancelled delivery at the last minute, leaving Emily without essential ingredients for the next day's orders. She finally broke down. She sat in the empty bakery kitchen after the employees she could now afford had gone home, and allowed herself a moment of weakness. The bell at the door rang, startling her. "We're closed," she called out, without getting up. "I know," replied a familiar voice, "but I needed to see you." James was standing at the kitchen door, looking as exhausted as she felt. There were deep, dark circles under his eyes and stubble she'd never seen before. "How did you get in?" "The door was unlocked," he replied. "You should be more careful." The concerned comment, so typical of him, almost made Emily smile, despite everything. "What do you want, James?" He took a few steps into the kitchen, still maintaining a respectful distance. "I came to say goodbye. I'm going back to San Francisco tomorrow." The news hit Emily with unexpected force. Despite everything, she hadn't imagined he would simply leave. "And the Williams mansion? The hotel?" "I sold the property. Another investor will take over the project." Emily nodded slowly, unable to articulate the confusion of feelings the news provoked. "I see." James took another step in her direction. "Before I go, I need you to know the whole truth. If after that you still want me to leave your life, I'll respect your decision." Emily indicated the chair across from her, in silent permission. James sat down, took a deep breath and began to speak. He told about how he met Catherine in college, about Sophie's birth, about the happy years they had together. He described with a choked voice the accident, a drunk driver who ran a red light when they were returning from a children's birthday party, how he survived with just a few scratches, while losing everything he loved. He talked about the months of depression that followed, about the survivor's guilt that consumed him, about the suicide plans he'd devised. He described how his mother, desperate, convinced him to go to therapy, to gradually return to work, to try to move forward. "But I merely existed. I wasn't living," he said hoarsely, "until the day I walked into your bakery and saw a woman drop a plate. I saw something in you at that moment, incredible strength beneath the apparent fragility, something that reminded me that it's worth continuing, that there's still beauty in the world." Emily listened in silence, tears freely streaming down her face. "I won't lie and say I didn't see parallels. Your twins are the age Sophie would be. You're a single mother, as Catherine would be if our roles had been reversed in the accident. But what I feel for you isn't a substitution, Emily. It's something new, something that caught me by surprise, something that scared me deeply because I had sworn never to allow myself to love again and risk losing everything a second time." James extended his hand across the table, not to touch Emily, but in a gesture of supplication. "As for the bakery renovations, I was selfish. I wanted to help, but I feared you would refuse if you knew it came from me. I thought, if it was presented as part of the repair package, you would accept without feeling diminished. It was wrong, I know. I should have been honest from the beginning." "Yes, you should have," agreed Emily softly. "I don't expect your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth before I leave. You and the twins deserve someone without so many scars, someone who can love without fear." Emily studied the man before her, broken, imperfect, but genuine in his pain and his remorse. She thought of Michael, who had fled at the first difficulty. She thought of herself, of the walls she had built around her heart, of the constant fear of trusting again. "We all have scars, James," she finally said. "Mine are no less deep than yours." He raised his eyes, a flash of hope crossing his exhausted gaze. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want you to go." The words came more easily than Emily expected, as if her heart had made the decision long before her rational mind. "I'm furious with you for lying. I'm hurt that you didn't trust me enough to share your pain, but I also understand the fear. I live with it every day." Emily stood up, walking around the table to be closer to him. "I don't know what I feel for you, James. I don't know if it can work. But I know that when you weren't here these past weeks, nothing felt right. And I know my children miss you as much as I do." Retry G continue edit. James stood up as well, his eyes fixed on hers, as if fearing she might disappear at any moment. "I'm willing to try if you are," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Slowly, one day at a time. No secrets this time." Emily nodded, allowing herself to take a small step in his direction. "One day at a time," she agreed, "starting with you officially. Meeting my children as... What exactly are you in my life?" A hesitant smile illuminated James's tired face. "Whatever you want me to be. For now, let's say you're a very special friend of Mommy's. The rest, We'll see with time, James agreed, respecting the boundaries she established. There was a long road ahead, much trust to rebuild, many fears to overcome. But for the first time in years, both felt something that had disappeared from their lives. Hope. The sound of children's laughter echoed across the nearly deserted beach. The late afternoon, sun cast golden reflections on the sand and sea, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Emily watched, sitting on a blanket spread on the sand, as James taught the twins to fly a colorful kite they had built together that morning. 3 months had passed since the conversation in the bakery kitchen. 3 months of careful rebuilding, of honest conversations, of respected boundaries, and slowly restored trust. James had decided to stay in town, although he had sold the Williams mansion. He bought a smaller house, close to the beach, and resumed his work as an architect remotely, occasionally traveling to San Francisco when necessary. The relationship between them evolved at a pace Emily set, without pressure. "Look, Mom, we're doing it!" shouted Lucy, as the kite soared into the sky, dancing with the wind. Emily waved, her heart full, seeing the joy on her children's faces. It was a different joy, more complete, that she hadn't seen since they were babies, before they began to feel the absence of a father in their lives. James left the kite controls with Lucas, who now trusted him enough to accept his guidance without resistance, and came to sit beside Emily. "They're naturals at this," he commented, watching the children with evident affection. "Lucas has an impressive concentration for his age. He's always been that way." "Born serious," replied Emily, allowing her fingers to find his on the sand, an intimacy she now permitted herself more frequently. "Emily," James began after a few moments of comfortable silence, "I need to tell you something." She turned to him, a shadow of apprehension crossing her face. "Something wrong?" "No, it's nothing like that," he hastened to reassure her. "It's just that I received a phone call this morning. It was Michael." Emily felt her body instantly stiffen. Michael, the name that hadn't been mentioned in her home for years. The man who had left without looking back, leaving her to face pregnancy, childbirth, sleepless nights, and the financial and emotional concerns of raising 2 children alone. "How did he get your number?" she finally asked, her voice tense. "Apparently, he was at the bakery when you weren't there. He spoke with your assistant, Amanda, said he was the twins' father and wanted to get in touch. She, not knowing the history, gave him my number, since you always instruct the staff to contact me in case of emergencies." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, trying to process the information. "Michael, back, after 5 years. What did he want?" James hesitated. "He wants to see the twins. Said he's sorry, that he's changed, that he wants to be part of their lives." The bitter laugh that escaped Emily's lips surprised them both. "Of course he does. Now that they're raised, that we've gone through the difficult part, he shows up wanting to reap the fruits of work he didn't do." James gently squeezed her hand. "We don't need to decide anything now. I just thought you should know." Emily nodded, grateful for the understanding. "What do you think?" she asked, genuinely valuing his opinion. James reflected for a moment, looking at the twins who were now running along the beach, chasing the kite that had fallen. "I think that as a father, even if only in heart and not in blood, I would never forgive myself for abandoning my children. But I also think that, as a father, I would want a second chance if I made such a terrible mistake." It was a balanced response that considered all angles, typical of James. "He wants to talk to you," he continued. "I gave him your number. I hope you don't mind." Emily sighed deeply. "No, you did the right thing. It's a conversation I need to have, sooner or later." They remained silent for a while, watching the sun beginning to set on the horizon, painting the sky with vibrant colors. "I was afraid of what you would feel when he showed up," admitted James, surprising Emily with his vulnerable honesty. "He's the biological father of your children. You have a history." Emily turned to him, holding his face between her hands. "A terrible history," she replied firmly. "What we have, you and I, is something completely different. Something built on respect, trust, and real presence. Don't compare yourself to him, James, ever." He nodded, visibly relieved. Emily allowed herself to rest her head on his shoulder, a gesture of intimacy she was still learning to accept without fear. "I don't know what to tell the twins," she confessed. "How to explain that the father they never knew suddenly wants to be part of their lives." "With honesty, to the extent they can understand," James replied. "And I'll be by your side if you want, when that moment comes." The twins came running back, interrupting the conversation. They were breathless, their faces flushed from the wind, and running. "Can we eat now?" asked Lucy, always the first to feel hungry. "I'm dying." "What an exaggeration, Lucy." Emily laughed, grateful for the distraction. "But yes, let's eat." As they unwrapped the sandwiches and fruit they had brought, Emily observed the three interacting, James helping Lucas open his juice, Lucy animatedly recounting how the kite flew higher than all the clouds. They looked like a family. They felt like a family. And now Michael was returning to complicate everything. The meeting happened 2 days later, at a neutral cafe in the center of town. Emily arrived purposely 10 minutes late, a small revenge for his 5 years of absence. Michael was already there, seated at a table in the back. Emily recognized him immediately, despite the changes. The shorter hair, the more filled-out body, some expression lines that weren't there before. Her heart gave a strange leap, not of longing or love, but of anger contained for so long. Stood up when he saw her, a hesitant smile on his lips. "Emily," he said, as if testing the name after so long. "You look beautiful." She didn't return the greeting, sitting without extending her hand or offering her face for the kiss he seemed to expect. "What do you want, Michael?" Straight to the point. No room for nostalgia or emotional manipulation. He seemed momentarily disconcerted by the coldness, but soon composed himself, sitting down again. "I want to meet my children," he replied, looking her in the eyes. "I know I don't deserve to, that I was a coward, but I'm different now." "Different how?" asked Emily, arching an eyebrow. "Financially stable? Emotionally mature? Or just bored with your life and looking for something new to fill the void?" The harshness of the words seemed to hit him like a physical blow. "I deserve that," he admitted, lowering his eyes. "I deserve your anger, your contempt. I did something unforgivable. I'm not interested in your self-flagellation, Michael. I want to know why, after 5 years without a single call, without a penny of child support, without even a birthday card, you think you have the right to appear in my children's lives." "Our children," he corrected softly. "No," retorted Emily, leaning over the table. "My children. You gave up the right to call them yours when you chose not to participate in their lives. Biologically, yes, you're the father, but fatherhood is much more than DNA." Michael nodded, accepting the reprimand. "You're right. In all these years, I haven't been a father. I didn't even try to be. And I have no excuses beyond my own cowardice and immaturity." He paused, taking a sip of the coffee that was cooling in front of him. "But I'm here now, asking for a chance, not to come back to you," he added quickly, seeing Emily's expression. "I know that ship sailed long ago. I'm asking for the chance to know Lucy and Lucas, to try to be the father they deserve." Emily studied the man in front of her. He seemed sincere, but Michael had always been good at seeming sincere. It had taken years for her to understand that his words rarely corresponded to his actions. "How did you know about them? Their names? Michael seemed embarrassed. "I've kept in touch with your cousin Denise. She gives me occasional updates, photos sometimes." The revelation was like a stab wound. Denise, her own family, feeding information to the man who had abandoned her at the most vulnerable moment of her life. "I see," she said coldly. "And what changed now? Why the sudden interest in being a father?" Michael breathed deeply as if gathering courage. "I almost died last year. A car accident. I was in a coma for 2 weeks." Emily felt an unexpected tightness in her chest. Despite everything, she didn't wish Michael ill. "When I woke up, I realized I had wasted years of my life running from responsibilities, from real connections. I realized I could have died without ever knowing my own children." He pulled out his wallet, removing a crumpled photo. "Denise gave me this 3 years ago. It's the only image I have of them." Emily looked at the photograph. The twins must have been about 2 years old, smiling with faces dirty from ice cream. She remembered that day, a rare moment of joy amid the difficulties. Knowing that Michael had that memory, even at a distance, provoked conflicting feelings. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" he asked, with genuine pride. "They are," agreed Emily, returning the photo. "And they are wonderful children, intelligent, sensitive, children who have been asking about their father for years, who have already cried for not having a father on Father's Day at school, who have already felt different, abandoned." Michael lowered his head, visibly shaken. "I know I caused irreparable damage. I know nothing I do now will erase these years, but I'm willing to try, Emily. I'm willing to be the father they need from now on." Emily leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "And how do you plan to do that? Are you moving here, or do you expect sporadic visits when it's convenient. For you? Already moved. I rented an apartment 10 blocks. I transferred my work to home office. I'm committed, Emily. The determination in his voice was something new. The old Michael never committed to anything that required continuous effort. Who is he? Michael suddenly asked, changing the direction of the conversation. Who? The man who answered my call. James, right? Denise mentioned you're seeing someone. Emily felt a wave of irritation. Yes, I'm seeing someone, but that's none of your business. If he's around my children, it is my business, insisted Michael, a flash of the old selfishness appearing in his eyes. No, it's not, Emily replied firmly. You gave up any right to an opinion about my personal life the moment you walked out the door 5 years ago. Michael seemed about to argue, but then sighed, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration that Emily remembered well. You're right. I'm sorry. It's just that it's hard to imagine someone else occupying a place in their lives, a place that should have been mine. You should have thought of that before, replied Emily, but without the previous harshness. There was something almost pathetic in the way Michael now recognized what he had lost. They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of 5 years of absence and hurt hovering between them. What do you want, Emily? Michael finally asked. Tell me what I need to do to have the chance to meet them. Emily reflected at length. Part of her wanted to deny Michael any access to the twins, to punish him eternally for the abandonment. But another part, the part that saw the longing in her children's eyes whenever they spotted other children with their fathers, knew she had no right to deny them this connection, however late it might be. Let's do this, she finally said. First, you and I will have some sessions with a family therapist. I need to be sure you're really committed, that you won't disappear again once the novelty wears off. Michael nodded promptly. Then, if the therapist agrees you're ready, I'll introduce you to the twins as their biological father. I don't promise to call you Dad in front of them. You'll have to earn that title. Fair, he agreed. The meetings will be supervised by me initially. As you prove you're reliable, we can discuss more independent visits. Michael listened attentively, accepting each condition without protest. And I want it to be clear, this isn't about you and me. There's no possible reconciliation between us. I have a life, someone I love, and that's not up for discussion. I understand perfectly, he assured. I just want the chance to be a father to my children. Emily studied him for a long moment, looking for signs of the old Michael, the selfish and immature man who had abandoned her. He was still there, in certain gestures, in certain looks, but there was also something new, a serenity, a humility that didn't exist before. One last thing, she added. If at any point I feel your presence is harming my children in any way, it's over. No discussion, no second chance. Agreed, Michael replied without hesitation. They come first, Emily nodded, feeling a strange weight in her chest. Not exactly relief, not exactly sadness, but something between the two. I'll talk to the therapist who's been seeing the twins. I'll contact you when we have a session scheduled. She stood up, indicating that the conversation was over. Michael did the same, extending his hand hesitantly. Thank you, Emily. I know I don't deserve this chance. She looked at the extended hand for a moment before shaking it briefly. I'm not doing this for you, Michael. I'm doing it for my children. The news of Michael's reappearance fell like a bomb on the small bubble of happiness that Emily, James, and the twins had built in recent months. That night, after the children were asleep, Emily and James sat on the balcony of her apartment, sharing a bottle of cheap wine and the weight of uncertainties. How was it? Asked James, pouring a second glass for Emily. Strange, she replied, shrugging. He seems different, more mature. Said he almost died in an accident last year, that it made him reevaluate everything. James nodded, processing the information in silence. He's already rented an apartment here. He's determined to be part of the twins' lives. And how do you feel about that? The question was genuine, without judgment. Emily sighed, looking at the starry sky above them, confused. Part of me wants to keep him away, protect the children from another disappointment, but another part knows they deserve the chance to know their own father. James covered her hand with his in a comforting gesture. You're doing the right thing, giving them that opportunity. Regardless of what Michael did to you, he is their father. Emily turned to him, her eyes bright with contained emotion. How can you be so understanding? Most men would be insecure, jealous. James smiled slightly. I'm not most men, and I'm not competing with Michael, Emily. Not for your heart, which has already made its decision, nor for the place I occupy in the twins' lives. He paused, carefully choosing his words. Lucas and Lucy need their biological father. That doesn't diminish what we've built together. They're different relationships, equally important. Emily leaned in, kissing him softly. There was so much security, so much emotional maturity in this man. So different from Michael, who always needed to be the center of attention, who saw competition around every corner. I'm afraid, she admitted in a whisper. What if he changes his mind again? What if he hurts them? Then we'll be here to pick up the pieces, James replied simply. Like we do every time they get hurt, whether falling off a bike or losing a favorite toy. Emily rested her head on his shoulder, allowing herself to be comforted. The last reservations she held regarding James seemed to dissipate with each demonstration of his quiet strength, his deep understanding of what really mattered. I love you, she said for the first time, the words escaping before she could contain them. James remained still for a moment, as if fearing any movement might break the spell of that instant. I've loved you since the first broken plate, he finally replied, his voice hoarse with emotion. That night, under the stars of the small coastal town, they sealed a commitment that went beyond words. It wasn't just about them, but about the family they were building. A family that would now have to find room for one more person, however difficult it might be. The first session with the family therapist, Dr. Julia, was tense but productive. Michael seemed genuinely committed, responding with raw honesty to difficult questions about his abandonment, his motivations for returning, his expectations for the future. I don't expect forgiveness, he said at one point, looking directly at Emily. I know what I did is unforgivable. I just want the chance to be better from now on. After 3 sessions, Dr. Julia considered it was time to introduce Michael to the twins. The conversation with the children was one of the most difficult Emily had ever had. Sitting in the living room, with James present at Emily's request for moral support, she explained in the simplest way possible that their father, who had been traveling for a very long time, had returned and wanted to meet them. Like Sophia's dad, who works on the ship? Asked Lucy, referring to a little schoolmate whose father was a sailor. Something like that, replied Emily, exchanging a look with James. He couldn't be with you until now, but he really wants to meet you. Will he live with us? Lucas's question revealed his deepest concerns. No, honey. He has his own home. You'll visit him occasionally, if you want. And Uncle James? Insisted Lucas, looking at the man who had become a constant and comforting presence in his life. James approached, crouching to be at eye level with the boy. I'm not going anywhere, champ. I'll continue to be here, as always. The response seemed to momentarily calm Lucas, but Emily could see the confusion in his little eyes. It was too complex for a 5-year-old to understand the emotional arrangements of adults. The first meeting took place in a public park, neutral territory. Emily arrived with the twins, who were unusually quiet, clinging to her hands. Michael was already waiting, sitting on a bench, visibly nervous. When they approached, he stood up, uncertain how to act. Emily made the formal introductions, observing how the twins partially hid behind her legs, a sudden shyness taking over those normally extroverted children. Hi, said Michael, crouching as he had seen James do so many times. I'm Michael, your father. The twins looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and caution. It was Lucy, always the boldest, who spoke first. Why did you never come see us before? The question, so direct and innocent, hit Michael like a punch. Emily saw the pain in his eyes, but didn't interfere. It was a fair question that deserved an honest answer. Because I was very afraid, he replied after a moment. Afraid of not being a good father, of doing everything wrong. It was a very big mistake that I made, and I regret it every day. The response, simple but sincere, seemed to momentarily satisfy Lucy's curiosity. Do you know how to play soccer? Asked Lucas, taking a small step forward. Michael's face lit up. I do. Would you like to play a bit? Lucas nodded shyly. Michael looked at Emily, silently asking for permission, which she granted with a brief nod. The first minutes were awkward, with the twins still cautious, responding with monosyllables to Michael's attempts at conversation. But as the ball rolled, between them, the barriers began to slowly fall. Soon, spontaneous laughter replaced the awkward silence. Emily watched from a distance, her heart tight. It was strange to see her children interacting with the man who shared their blood, but who until then had been just a ghost in their lives. Even stranger was noticing the gestures, the expressions, the small mannerisms that the twins had inherited. from Michael, without ever having lived with. The meeting lasted an hour, time enough to break the initial ice, but not so much that it became tiring for the children. When they said goodbye, Michael visibly restrained himself from hugging them, respecting the space they still needed. "Can we see each other again?" he asked, looking at Emily. Before she could respond, Lucy intervened. "Will you bring ice cream?" "Next time," Michael laughed, relieved by the opening offered. "Any flavor you want." On the way home, the twins bombarded Emily with questions about Michael. She answered with honesty appropriate to their age, without vilifying their father, but also without romanticizing his return. When they arrived at the apartment, James was waiting for them with dinner ready. The twins ran to him, eager to tell about the meeting with this stranger who was their father. James listened with genuine interest, asking appropriate questions without showing any sign of jealousy or insecurity. Later, when the children finally fell asleep, exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of the day, Emily found James in the kitchen, washing the dinner dishes. "How are you?" he asked, drying his hands to embrace her. Exhausted, confused, relieved in a way. Relieved. Emily leaned against the counter, organizing her chaotic thoughts. Michael seems to have really changed. The twins liked him, at least. "Initially, part of me feared it would be a complete disaster." James nodded, understanding. "And now? Now we go step by step. More supervised meetings, seeing how the children respond, how he behaves. If everything goes well, eventually longer visits, maybe even spending a few hours alone with him. Do you think he'll stay this time?" The question had been hanging in the air for days. Emily sighed. "Honestly, I don't know. He seems sincere." But Michael was always good at seeming sincere for short periods of time. The test will be when the novelty wears off, when fatherhood becomes routine, with all its frustrations and challenges. James pulled her into a hug, offering the silent comfort of his solid presence. "Whatever happens, we're not alone in this," he reminded her. That night, as Emily tried to sleep, she thought about how her life had changed in just 1 year. From the desperate loneliness of a single mother struggling to survive, to the complexity of a heart that had found love again, and a family that now needed to learn to include the man who had once abandoned her. In the following weeks, Michael kept his word, showing up punctually for each scheduled meeting, always with small gifts for the twins. Never ostentatious displays, but items chosen with obvious care. A book about constellations for Lucas, who was beginning to take an interest in astronomy. A small box of special paints for Lucy, who loved to paint. The twins, initially cautious, quickly surrendered to Michael's natural charm, the same charm that had won Emily over years ago. She watched, divided between gratitude at seeing them happy and fear that this happiness might be ephemeral. It was after the 5th meeting, when the twins were already running into Michael's arms as soon as they saw him, that Emily realized James was unusually quiet. "Is something bothering you?" she asked directly, when they were alone in her kitchen, preparing dinner. James stopped cutting the vegetables, thoughtful. "It's not exactly bothering," he replied cautiously. "It's more concern about Michael, about all of us." He chose his words carefully. The twins are quickly becoming attached to him. If he leaves again, Emily felt a tightness in her chest. It was exactly what kept her awake at night. "I know he seems sincere," continued James, "but I've seen how he looks at you sometimes, Emily. It's not just the children he wants back in his life." The observation caught Emily by surprise. She was so focused on protecting the twins that she hadn't paid attention to the signals Michael might be sending. "That's ridiculous," she protested, although a small voice in her mind agreed with James. "Michael knows we're together, that I'm happy." "I know he knows," agreed James. "But that doesn't mean he's accepted it." He approached, holding her hands tenderly. "I'm just asking that we be careful. I don't want to lose what we've built." The fear in his voice was so palpable that Emily felt her heart squeeze. This man, who had endured the most devastating loss imaginable, was now afraid of losing her and the twins he had accepted as his own. "You won't lose me," she promised, holding his face between her hands. "Or the twins. What we have is real, James. Michael is the past." The words seemed right when she said them, but that night, lying beside a sleeping James, Emily couldn't stop thinking about his warning. Was Michael really trying to win her back along with the children? And more disturbingly, was there any part of her, however small, that would still respond to this? The answer came sooner than expected. After 2 months of successful, supervised visits, Emily finally allowed Michael to take the twins to spend an afternoon at his apartment. he had meticulously prepared, decorating a room especially for them, with 2 small, colorful beds, shelves full of books and toys. When she went to pick them up, as agreed, she found the 3 making cookies in the small kitchen of Michael's apartment. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that for a moment, Emily felt a strange pang of nostalgia for what could have been if Michael had made different choices 5 years ago. "Mom, we made chocolate cookies!" exclaimed Lucy, her little face sprinkled with flour. "I can see that," Emily laughed. "Looks like you had fun." "It was amazing," confirmed Lucas, usually more restrained in his displays of enthusiasm. "Dad has a telescope just like Uncle James's, but bigger." The mention of James seemed to hit Michael like an unwelcome reminder. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he composed himself. "Come on, wash your hands while I pack some cookies for you to take," he said, indicating the bathroom. When the children left, Michael turned to Emily with a serious expression. "Can we talk for a minute?" She nodded, instantly on guard. There was something in his posture, in the intensity of his gaze, that made her uncomfortable. "The twins are incredible, Emily. You did a wonderful job raising them alone." "Thank you," she replied, cautious. "They talk a lot about James," he continued, a shadow of resentment in his voice. "He seems to have been very present in their lives." "He has been," confirmed Emily, holding his gaze. "James is very important to us." Michael took a step in her direction, dangerously reducing the space between them. "And me? Where do I fit in that equation?" "You're their father, Michael. No one can change that." "Just the father?" he asked, his voice suddenly lower, more intimate. "Is there no room for more?" Before Emily could respond, Michael leaned in and kissed her. It was a quick, almost chaste kiss, but loaded with intention. She immediately pulled back, pushing him by the shoulders. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed, anxiously looking toward the hallway, fearing the twins might return at any moment. Michael seemed genuinely confused by her reaction. "I thought, the way you look at me sometimes, I thought perhaps you were feeling the same." "The same what, Michael?" "Nostalgia for something that never really worked. I love James. We're building a life together." "He's not the father of your children," insisted Michael, a hint of desperation in his voice. "I am. We could be a real family, Emily. The 4 of us." Emily felt a mixture of anger and pity. Michael still hadn't changed as much as he thought. He still believed he could simply decide what he wanted and get it, without considering the feelings and choices of others. "No, Michael, that's never going to happen. I'm glad you want to be a father to the twins, but that's all you can be in my life." The pain on his face was genuine, but there was also something else, a flash of the old Michael, the man who didn't accept being contradicted. "Is it because of his money?" "Because I have money now too. I can give you and the children everything you need." The accusation was like a slap. Emily grabbed her purse, heading for the hallway. "Lucas! Lucy! Time to go home!" Michael held her arm. "Emily, please. I'm sorry, that was stupid." She pulled away, looking at him with a coldness she didn't really feel. "Yes, it was. And if you ever try anything like that again, the visits are over. Understood?" He nodded, defeated. The twins returned, still excited about the fun afternoon, oblivious to the tension between the adults. Emily forced a smile, helping them put on their jackets, collecting the bag of cookies Michael had set. Aside, "Can we come back tomorrow?" asked Lucy hopefully. "Not tomorrow, darling, but soon, if your father agrees to some important rules." Michael nodded silently, understanding the message between the lines. On the way home, Emily struggled to organize her chaotic thoughts. Michael's attitude had confirmed James's fears. Worse still, it had awakened doubts about her own ability to read the situation. Had she given mixed signals without realizing it? Was there any part of her that still responded to the familiarity of Michael, to their shared past, to the fact that he was the father of her children? When they arrived at the apartment, James was waiting for them with dinner ready. Upon seeing his face, Emily immediately knew she wouldn't be able to hide what had happened. He knew her too well. After the twins went to bed, exhausted from the exciting afternoon, she told him everything. James's expression darkened, but he showed no surprise. "I knew it," he said simply. "I could see it in his eyes every time you met." "Why? Didn't you say anything?" "Because I needed you to see for yourself, and because I trust you, Emily." The simplicity of the response brought tears to her eyes. Trust, something so fundamental. yet so scarce in her life until she met James. "What do we do now?" she asked. James reflected for a moment. "We can't prevent Michael from seeing the twins. They've already become attached to him, and he is their father, regardless of how he feels about you. So we just ignore what happened?" "No," replied James firmly. "We establish clear boundaries. Maybe I should be present at the next few visits for a while until he understands that you're not available." The suggestion was sensible, but Emily hesitated. "I'm afraid of how he'll react. Michael has always been volatile when contradicted." "What if he decides to fight for custody?" James held her hands firmly. "He has no basis for that. You're an exemplary mother. The twins are healthy and happy, and even if he tries, we'll be prepared." There was a determination in his voice that calmed Emily's fears. This man, who had entered her life so unexpectedly, was now her safe harbor, and she would do anything to protect what they had built together. The confrontation Emily feared happened 2 weeks later, during a supervised visit at the park. James had insisted on accompanying her to make the message clear to Michael. The Ajax twins played on the slide, happy in their childish innocence, while the 3 adults maintained a tense conversation on the nearby bench. "So I need a babysitter now?" asked Michael sarcastically, looking at James. "Don't be childish," replied Emily. "James is here because he's part of our family, and because after what happened, I don't feel comfortable being alone with you." Michael had the decency to appear embarrassed. "I've already apologized for that. It was a stupid impulse." "It was more than that," intervened James calmly. "It was a lack of respect for Emily and me, and it confuses the children." Michael turned to him, his face hardening. "Don't tell me how to act with my children. You're not their father." "Not biologically," agreed James, without losing his composure. "But I've been present in their lives longer than you have, Michael. I know their fears, their dreams, their habits. That counts for something. It counts for everything," added Emily, placing her hand on James's arm. "Fatherhood isn't just DNA." Michael looked at the gesture, his jaw tense. "What exactly do you want from me? To pretend I'm happy seeing another man raise my children? To accept crumbs of time with them while you two play happy family?" There was so much bitterness in his voice that Emily almost felt pity. Almost. "We want you to respect our boundaries," she replied firmly. "To understand that I have a life with James now, and that's not going to change. If you can accept that, you can continue to be part of the twins' lives. If not..." The implicit threat hung in the air. Michael looked at his children, playing happily, oblivious to the adult drama unfolding. "You really think you can prevent me from seeing my own children?" The tone was dangerously low. "Legally," replied James. "Yes, we can. You abandoned them, Michael. No child support, no contact for 5 years. Any judge would consider that child abandonment." Emily looked at James, surprised. He had never mentioned consulting a lawyer, but had clearly done his homework. "We don't want to reach that point," she added, softening her tone. "The twins adore you, Michael. It would be traumatic for them." Continue edit. "The twins adore you, Michael. It would be traumatic for them to lose their father now that they've finally met you. But you need to decide what's more important, your ego or their well-being." Michael remained silent for a long moment, watching the children. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with defeat. "All I ever wanted was a family. You have one," replied Emily gently. "Not in the way you imagined, but you have 2 wonderful children who are eager to know you, to love you. Isn't that enough?" The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. Michael looked at James, studying the man who had taken his place in Emily's life and, in a way, in his children's lives. There was resentment in his gaze, but also something new, a glimmer of reluctant respect. "They talk a lot about you," he finally admitted. "About the kites you build together, the stars you observe. You've been good to them." It was as close to acknowledgement as he could manage, and James accepted it with a nod. "They're extraordinary children," he replied simply, "easy to love." The moment of understanding between the 2 men was brief, but significant. A silent armistice for the sake of the 2 small lives now running toward them, tired of playing and eager for attention. "Dad, are you coming to my birthday next week?" asked Lucy, throwing herself into Michael's arms. The innocent question created a moment of tension. The twins' birthday would be celebrated at James's house, which Emily and the children now also called home. Michael looked at Emily, a silent question in his eyes. "Of course your father is invited," she replied, surprising everyone, including herself. "If he wants to come." Michael hugged his daughter tightly. looking over her head at Emily. And James. I wouldn't miss it for anything, he promised. And for the first time, Emily truly believed he might be changing. James's house, a spacious wooden cottage by the seaside, was decorated with colorful balloons and banners, announcing, "Happy birthday Lucas and Lucy, 6 years." In the large backyard, tables had been arranged with festive tablecloths, and a small area of inflatable toys had been set up for the invited children. Emily circulated among the guests, checking if everyone was comfortable, if there was enough food and drink, occasionally glancing at the twins, who were running excitedly with their little friends from school. It was a perfect spring day with blue skies and a gentle breeze from the sea. Need help with anything? Michael's voice startled her. He had arrived punctually, bringing elaborately wrapped presents for his children, and since then had kept discreetly to the margins of the party, clearly uncomfortable in an environment where everyone except him seemed to know Emily and James intimately. I think everything's under control, she replied, surprised by the offer. But thank you. Michael nodded, looking around with an expression difficult to decipher. It's a beautiful house, he commented. James has good taste. There was no sarcasm in his voice, just an observation. He does, agreed Emily. The twins love it here, especially the direct access to the beach. Are you living together? The question was hesitant, as if he wasn't sure if he had the right to ask. Partially, replied Emily after a pause. I still keep my apartment, but we spend most of our time here. Michael nodded again, silently processing the information. After a few weeks of supervised visits and tense conversations, he finally seemed to accept the reality of the situation, or at least was making a visible effort to appear that he accepted it. He takes good care of you all, he said finally. It wasn't a question. Yes, he does, confirmed Emily. We're happy, Michael. Something in the simplicity of the statement seemed to hit him deeply. For a moment, Emily glimpsed the raw pain in his eyes, not just for losing her, but for the belated understanding of what he had thrown away years ago. I could have been him, said Michael, so low she almost didn't hear. If I hadn't been such a coward, so selfish. But you were, replied Emily without cruelty, just stating a fact. And now we're here. We need to move forward, for the twins' sake. Michael looked at his children, who at that moment were hanging from James, who pretended to be a sea monster trying to capture them. The three laughed uncontrollably, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding a few meters away. They love him, observed Michael, with a mixture of resignation and sadness. Yes, agreed Emily, and he loves them too, from the very first day. Is that why he did all this, isn't it? Michael suddenly asked. The millionaire who appeared out of nowhere and transformed your lives. He saw something in you and the twins that he needed in his own life. Emily considered the question for a moment. At the beginning, maybe. But what we have now goes far beyond that. James chose us, every day, even when it would have been easier to give up, especially when you came back. And I abandoned you, completed Michael, the bitter realization in his voice. Even when it would have been harder to leave. It's the past, Michael. We can't change it. But you can build something new with Lucas and Lucy now. Michael nodded, seeming to reach some internal decision. I think I finally understand what it means to be a father, he said, looking at James and the twins. It's not about what I want or need. It's about what's best for them. Before Emily could respond, the twins ran in their direction, followed by James. Mom! Dad! Uncle James said we can cut the cake now, exclaimed Lucy, her eyes shining with excitement. Emily noticed how the girl had naturally addressed both men, with the titles they had spontaneously assumed in her life. Michael as dad, James as uncle. Although she knew that in her little heart, James was much more than that. The four adults exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Then, to Emily's surprise, Michael stepped forward and extended his hand to James. Thank you, he said simply, for taking care of them when I couldn't, for doing what I should have done. James accepted the handshake, his expression serious. You don't need to thank me. They're the best thing that ever happened to me, along with Emily. I know exactly what you mean, replied Michael with a sad smile. At that moment, watching the two men who had marked her life in such different ways, Emily felt a peace she didn't expect to find. The path to this point had been tortuous, painful, full of losses and discoveries. But now, looking at her smiling children, at the man she had chosen to love, and even at the man she had learned to forgive, she felt they were all finally where they should be. 2 years later, The sunset painted the sky with orange and pink hues, creating a perfect backdrop for the small ceremony taking place on the beach. Emily, dressed in a simple white cotton dress, held James's hands as the celebrant pronounced the words that would formalize their union. In the first row of chairs arranged on the sand, Lucas and Lucy, now 8 years old, watched with eyes bright with emotion. Beside them, Michael smiled discreetly, his arm around the shoulders of Sarah, the therapist who had helped him in the process of reconnecting with his children and who, ironically, had ended up becoming his companion. The last two. Years had brought changes that none of them could have foreseen. Michael had finally found his place as a father, present in the twins' lives without trying to replace the special bond they had formed with James. Weekend visits became routine, nightly calls to wish goodnight, a comforting constant. James had officially adopted the twins the previous year, with Michael's consent and support, a gesture that surprised everyone, but perfectly symbolized the unconventional family they had become. Lucas and Lucy now had two fathers who loved them deeply, each in his own way. Emily's bakery prospered, having expanded to a larger space in the center of town. James continued his work as an architect, but now focused on community projects in the region, schools, libraries, affordable housing. Michael, motivated by the experience of almost losing everything, had rekindled his old passion for photography and now ran a small art gallery in town. Do you, Emily Sanders, take James Miller as your lawful wedded husband, to love and respect, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, all the days of your life? Emily looked at the man in front of her, the stranger who had walked into her bakery on an ordinary day and transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined. The man who had done the impossible, restore her faith in love, in the future, in second chances. I do, she replied in a firm voice, without hesitation. When James kissed her, sealing the promise of a life together, the applause and whistles from the guests mingled with the sound of waves breaking on the shore. Emily felt the twins' arms encircling her legs, joining the embrace. Over James's shoulder, her gaze met Michael's, who discreetly raised his glass in a silent toast. There was no more hurt between them, just a mature acceptance of the path each had chosen and the consequences of those choices. Later, when the party was in full swing and James was dancing with Lucy on his feet, Emily found a moment of quiet at the water's edge, barefoot, letting the waves gently wet her feet. She reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here, from the despair of a young woman abandoned pregnant with twins, to the complete happiness of a loved woman, fulfilled, surrounded by a family that defied conventional definitions. A family built not just by blood ties, but by daily choices, by forgiveness, by second chances. What are you thinking about? Asked James, silently approaching to embrace her from behind. Emily smiled, leaning back against his strong chest. About how unpredictable life is. About how what seems to be our greatest tragedy might just be the beginning of something wonderful. James gently kissed her temple. When I walked into that bakery 3 years ago, I was just looking for a quiet place to work, maybe a good coffee. I never imagined I'd find my reason for living again. And I never imagined that a stranger who helped pick up broken porcelain shards from the floor would become the man who would help rebuild my life, piece by piece. Emily turned in his arms, looking at the party happening a few meters away. Lucas was now animatedly talking with Michael, showing him something in a small, portable telescope, a gift from both his fathers. Lucy had convinced some guests to form an improvised dance circle on the sand. They're happy, observed James, following her gaze. We all are. Emily nodded, feeling a profound gratitude flood her heart for every choice, every mistake, every pain that had brought her to this perfect moment. You really did the impossible, she said, tenderly touching the face of her now husband. Not just by building a bridge between the past and present, but by showing me that it's always possible to start over, no matter how broken we are. James smiled, that smile that still made her heart race. It wasn't that impossible, he replied. It just took a little patience, a lot of love, and the courage to believe we deserved a second chance. Hand in hand, they walked back to the party, to the family they had built together, one step at a time. The moon was beginning to rise on the horizon, silver and bright, illuminating the path ahead, a path that, Emily now knew, they would no longer have to travel alone. Did this story touch your heart? Share it. True love deserves to be told.